Welcome to a new episode of No Half Truths Inside Out Poora Sach. मैं राघवेंद्र सिंह आज आपके सामने लेके आ रहा हूँ one of our most distinguished diplomats and a historian to boot, TCA Raghavan. राघवन और हमने इनफैक्ट साथ भी काम किया है काफी दिनों तक मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स में. वो पाकिस्तान के हमारी तरफ से डिप्टी हाई कमिश्नर रहे, इंडिया के हाई कमिश्नर रहे पाकिस्तान में, और पाकिस्तान डेस्क को भी मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स में उन्होंने काफी दिनों तक देखा है. तो मुझे नहीं लगता रेडिली रिकॉलिंग कि कोई उनकी तरह का एक्सपीरियंस्ड आदमी होगा, हैंड्स ऑन आदमी होगा, जिन्होंने पाकिस्तान को इतने करीब से देखा है इन टर्म्स ऑफ एग्जीक्यूशन ऑफ पॉलिसीज, इन टर्म्स ऑफ trying to understand the various problems. So राघवन, हम लोगों ने तो साथ काम किया है और we go back a long way. तो इस conversation में, unlike other conversations, maybe because of our familiarity and also because we are more comfortable with each other, तो उसका शायद मैं फायदा उठाऊंगा. हो सकता है मैं थोड़ा सा आपको पुश करूं, आप पुश बैक कीजिएगा. ठीक है?
एब्सोल्युटली.
तो मेरा पहला सवाल आपसे ये है कि perhaps we all heaved a sigh of relief when we saw on the television this announcement that there was a ceasefire between India and Pakistan on what was going on. शुरू में तो हम यही समझते थे कि सीज फायर जो है वो वॉर के बाद होती है, लेकिन फिर मुझे याद आया कि 1948 में तो एक बड़ी इनफॉर्मल सी वॉर चल रही थी, कुछ खास डिक्लेरेशन तो हुआ नहीं था वॉर का. तो ये भी जो ऑपरेशनल वॉर चल रही थी, हमारी तरफ से ऑपरेशन सिंदूर, उनकी तरफ से एक और ऑपरेशन, तो उसका जब सीज फायर हुआ तो उसके बाद लोगों ने मीन मेख निकालना शुरू कर दिया और कहने लग गए कि साहब अमेरिकन ने जो है वो इसकी क्रेडिट ले ली, और मार्को रूबियो ने ये कह दिया, डोनाल्ड ट्रंप ने ये कह दिया. तो इसके बारे में आपका क्या कहना है?
एनीवे, थैंक यू राघवेंद्र फॉर कॉलिंग मी. एंड जिस तरह आपने कहा, हमारे बहुत पुराने रिश्ते हैं, सो वी कैन बी कंफर्टेबल विद ईच अदर.
जी.
तो आपका जो सवाल है, द फर्स्ट पॉइंट इज कि जो सरकार की तरफ से बयान आया,
जी,
फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी विदेश सचिव ने जो अपने प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस में कहा, उसमें उन्होंने सीज फायर का शब्द इस्तेमाल नहीं किया.
जी.
मतलब वो कैप्शन जर्नलिस्ट ने दिया या मीडिया ने दिया, पर उन्होंने खुद इस
शब्द
का इस्तेमाल नहीं किया. उन्होंने कहा स्टॉपिंग ऑफ हॉस्टिलिटीज, स्टॉपिंग ऑफ फायरिंग, पर सीज फायर का वर्ड उन्होंने इस्तेमाल नहीं किया. और उसके बाद भी जहां तक मैंने देखा, सरकार की तरफ से किसी बयान में सीज फायर का वर्ड इस्तेमाल
अमेरिकन ने किया है.
अमेरिकन ने किया, हमारी मीडिया ने किया, और लोगों ने कहा किया, बिकॉज आई मीन इन लेमन्स लैंग्वेज इट इज अ सीज फायर, बट टेक्निकली इट इज नॉट अ सीज फायर, क्योंकि ये तो हुआ नहीं था कि देवर फॉर्मल हॉस्टिलिटीज बिगन. पर अपने आप में इंडिया पाकिस्तान कॉन्टेक्स्ट में एक मिनी वॉर विदाउट देयर बीइंग अ डिक्लेयर्ड वॉर इज नॉट अ न्यू थिंग. इट्स नॉट समथिंग यूनिक. आफ्टर ऑल 1965 ऑल्सो, 1947-48 में आपने जिक्र किया दैट नॉर्मल रिलेशंस बिटवीन इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान कंटिन्यूड इवन व्हाइल अ वॉर वाज टेकिंग प्लेस इन कश्मीर.
जी.
1965 में नॉर्मल रिलेशंस डिड नॉट कंटिन्यू. देयर वाज अ फ्रीज इन द रिलेशनशिप, बट देयर वाज नो फॉर्मल डिक्लेरेशन ऑफ वॉर. It was not as if the embassies or high commissions were closed down and the diplomats returned to each other's countries, as happened in 1971.
Ji.
In 1971, there was a formal declaration of war. The Swiss embassy managed the diplomatic relations between the two countries for the interregnum. पर वो 1965 में नहीं हुआ. और कारगिल के साइन में भी there was no formal declaration of war, and in fact some aspects of India-Pakistan relations continued uninterrupted. आपको याद होगा उस टाइम, फॉर इंस्टेंस द लाहौर दिल्ली बस,
जी,
उस पर रोक नहीं लगाई गई थी.
जी.
वो वो बस चलती रही पूरे कारगिल के युद्ध के दरमियान. सो इंडिया पाकिस्तान रिलेशन में बहुत सारी अनयूजुअल चीज़ें हैं. और मेरे विचार में इट वाज अ गुड थिंग दैट बोथ कंट्रीज डिसाइडेड टू डी एस्केलेट. अब उस क्यों किया, किस तरह हुआ, उसके तरफ मतलब ऑल द इंफॉर्मेशन इज नॉट अवेलेबल. पर एक मोटी बात तो ये जरूर है दैट इट मस्ट हैव बीन इन द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ बोथ कंट्रीज टू डी एस्केलेट, विच इज व्हाई इट वाज एग्रीड. अगर हमारे हित में नहीं होता या पाकिस्तान के हित में नहीं होता, क्यों करते? तो सीधी सी बात है, मोटी बात तो वो है दैट इट वाज इन आवर इंटरेस्ट टू डी एस्केलेट एंड देयरफॉर वी एग्रीड टू इट.
मैं लोगों का ध्यान इस चीज पे लाना चाहता हूं कि 1948 में जब सीज फायर हुई थी 31 दिसंबर के पास, तो उसके पहले जो प्रेशर बन रहा था गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया के ऊपर बाय द वेस्टर्न पावर ब्लॉक, और जो प्रेशर उसी महीने में 1947 में जब हमें यूएन जाना पड़ा था, जो वेस्टर्न पावर ब्लॉक ने बनाया था. आप तो पाकिस्तान रिलेशंस के ऊपर आपकी तो महारत हासिल है, बिकॉज दसियों साल आपने जो है गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया में हमारे सफ़ीर रहे, पाकिस्तान में हाई कमिश्नर रहे, यहाँ पाकिस्तान डिवीज़न को देखा. तो हमें बता सकते हैं, हमारे व्यूअर्स को बता सकते हैं वो 2 दिसंबर्स और उसको अभी के साथ कंपेयर कर सकते हैं?
द सिचुएशन देन तो काफ़ी मतलब द सिचुएशन हैज चेंज सिंस देन.
जी.
But one point has remained the same, that military options don't take you beyond a point. So 48 में in December when we agreed to the ceasefire, it was very clear then that the military option had exhausted itself. Whatever had to be gained from the military option had been gained. उससे ज़्यादा आप military option के through हासिल नहीं कर सकते थे. That was the reality which stared you in the face, and therefore it was felt that it is in your interest to go in for a ceasefire. This time also it was very clear that whatever messages you wanted to convey through kinetic action had been conveyed. There was no reason to persist with those options, because military options at the end are not going to provide a solution to India-Pakistan issues. ये बात समझने में लोगों को काफ़ी तकलीफ होती है, हिंदुस्तान में भी और पाकिस्तान में भी, बिकॉज बोथ थिंक दैट एट सम स्टेज वी विल बी एबल टू विश द अदर साइड अवे. मतलब पाकिस्तान में ये एक राय है बहुत लोगों की कि इफ दे जस्ट सिट इट आउट, कि कुछ ना करें, भारत अपने आप टूट जाएगा, कि उसके अंदर के कॉन्ट्रडिक्शंस इतने सारे हैं दैट इट विल नॉट बी एबल टू मैनेज एंड एट सम स्टेज इट विल ब्रेक अप. They just have to wait for that moment. Similarly, in India, there are these misconceptions about Pakistan कि वो किसी तरह टूटने वाला है
जी,
कि वो कल वो प्रॉब्लम रहेगी नहीं, तो we have to sit it out. अब these are misconceptions, because in the end you have to deal with your neighbor as it is, not as how you would like it to be. So in my view, in the present juncture, it was good that the government was realistic, and having realized that the messages which were required to be conveyed after a terrible terrorist attack had been conveyed, they agreed to a de-escalation.
जो जम्मू कश्मीर का जो मसला है वो उलझा कब? वो 48 में ही उलझा मेनली, और since then for some reason or the other we've been facing this problem continuously. तो जब आपने कहा कि नहीं साहब, the military options had exhausted themselves in 1948 and thereafter the problem became a festering wound. So to say that the military options had exhausted themselves, आप ये समझते हैं कि do you want to still remain with that position?
Oh yes, absolutely. Theoretically at any point of time there are any number of options which are available. And again, theoretically, you can create options where choices don't exist. You can increase the options available to you. But in practical terms, there are options which are tangible and which exist, and there are intangible options. And in the normal course, realism requires that you go for the tangible existing options rather than.
फिर आपके कहने का मतलब ये है कि जो बीत गई सो बात गई,
नहीं,
जो छूट गया सो छूट गया,
नहीं, मेरा कहने का
छूट
मतलब
गया तो छूट गया.
मेरे कहने का मतलब ये है कि 1947 में जो सिचुएशन एज इट एग्जिस्टेड देन was that those areas where the national conference led by Sheikh Abdullah had its most powerful support. Those areas the Indian army had no difficulty in establishing its control and in expelling the tribal invaders. But those areas where historically the national conference was weak, and that was primarily in the Punch part of the old Jammu and Kashmir state, and the Muzaffarabad of the part of the old Jammu and Kashmir state, where the national conference traditionally did not have deep roots. Those areas we found that it was going to be very difficult for the army to make territorial gains and then retain those gains. So this was the advice, to my knowledge, which was coming from not just the military, but was also coming from the political voices in Kashmir, and primarily from Sheikh Abdullah.
The political voice in Kashmir
Sheikh Abdullah.
was Sheikh Abdullah.
Sheikh Abdullah, and in his view that, whatever those areas where the national conference did not have a ground level support, it would be very difficult to go and establish your military presence there. Then, of course, there is the whole issue of Gilgit-Baltistan, which is really the big area, as you pointed out. But the other areas are relatively small. This is the widely shared perceptions. If you talk to people,
Widely shared perception, to my mind, is that wherever the Kabilis or the irregulars or the rebels came across the National Conference volunteers, they became turncoats. Whatever happened, we were actually forced by wanting to ascertain the will of the people, etc., plebiscite, into again, something which would have led formally to even Kashmir's partition. I mean, I would much rather give credit first to the Jammu and Kashmir state forces, majorly, because they were there in all the most vulnerable areas. And of course, the Indian Army, when it landed, set foot in the Kashmir Valley and then sort of marched up till Uri and thereafter couldn't march. I do not know why.
in campaigning in the mountainous regions at that time was very difficult. To continue military operations into 49 and 50 would have required opening multiple fronts, especially in the plains. And there, the view was that this is not worth it, because those areas of Jammu and Kashmir where the Pakistanis have established their presence were outside the main catchment of the National Conference and Sheikh Abdullah support. And if you look at it historically, it's not as if that view is totally without foundation, because the Kashmir Valley had its own internal dynamic which was operating at that time, and certainly we should not underestimate the influence of Sheikh Abdullah over that political dynamic. But in the rest of the state, and especially in the plains area or in the foothills and in Punch and Muzaffarabad, the impact of what was happening in Punjab and the polarization which had taken place in Punjab, in British India, in Punjab, had a great impact over there. So that polarization also had certain consequences for the future of Jammu and Kashmir as a single entity, if you understand what I'm saying. So those were the objective realities on the ground. With the passage of time, those realities tend to retreat into the background, and we tend to see the situation in terms of
Contemporary
asymmetries and contemporary realities. But at that time, the situation was different.
So you talk of contemporary asymmetry. I fully appreciate that. But are you saying that the realities of the situation since then have been such that real politically we should not look forward to regaining these territories?
I think there are two aspects. I mean, let me put your question in these terms. there are two aspects. One is the legal and constitutional position. And the legal and constitutional position is black and white. That the whole of the old undivided state of Jammu and Kashmir is Indian territory. So in that sense, Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. Because it's our constitutional position, nobody can change it. The second aspect is that for a long period of time, over 75 years now, part of that state has not been in your effective administration. Now, the question is, can you reverse that 75-year-old period and bring that part of the state under your administration? If that is not possible, what are the other arrangements you should be thinking about? I think this is not just simple realism, but this is also the sensible and commonsensical way forward. That between neighboring countries, if you look around the world, there are any number of issues which exist. And in none of those issues is a black and white answer ever. Very rarely is it likely to emerge. Countries have to live with their differences.
But there is a very clinical way adopted by some countries in refurbishing their claims. And our northern neighbors, China, is one such which readily comes to my mind. How do you react to that?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. You can say China, with regard to establishing its claim in Tibet, took a certain set of measures and certain set of actions.
In Xinjiang.
But if you look at how it has managed, for instance, with Taiwan, that may change in the future, but I don't want to go into the future just now. But if you look at the last 70, 80 years as to how they have managed, they have lived also with the two China policy.
There is a talk right now that we've sort of put the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance. And the plea being taken is that, the situations now are such that we would not honor it because it is not in our strategic interests to honor it.
Well, I think on the Indus Waters Treaty, we need to have a greater and more detailed understanding of it. It is true that parts of the treaty need revisiting. And it is true not just from an Indian perspective, it is equally true from a Pakistani perspective. Because if we were to construct all the projects on the western rivers as are permitted under the treaty, Pakistan's concerns about our upstream capacities to withhold water will increase to a great extent, and they will acquire a real objective foundation. Now, that was not something which was envisaged in the treaty when it was framed. But it's a reality it's a reality which Pakistan is now facing up to. That suppose India says we will adhere fully to the treaty, but within that treaty, if they construct all the upstream projects which they are permitted to, it will give you a capacity to hold water at certain critical times, which was not anticipated when the treaty was being drafted. Similarly, our own concerns about the nature of project designs. You cannot remain wedded to the technology of the 1940s and 50s and 60s when looking at current requirements, because now we have a better idea of silting of Himalayan rivers, and certainly project design should take that into account. Why should you build suboptimal projects? So there is a basis on objective grounds for relooking at the parts of the treaty. But again, in terms of common sense, you cannot unilaterally proceed on river water issues because it goes against the dictates of common sense that you can starve a neighbor of water and expect to have cooperative relations in the region. It won't work like that. And that applies across the board. Not just with India-Pakistan, but with the host of other issues. So I would say that keeping it in abeyance is not a permanent or final solution. I think at some stage we will see more realistic assessments, both in Pakistan on their relationship with India. Because in the end, I think there is a great onus on Pakistan to think about its own future and the welfare of its people. And if they do that, they will understand that they need a more cooperative relationship with India.
But it hasn't happened like that in the last 75.
It hasn't happened like that for, and I agree. One of the great frustrations of anyone who has dealt with Pakistan is precisely that it hasn't happened, despite all the openings which we thought something was changing. It hasn't changed. There's this famous line of AJP Taylor that at every turning point of Germany's history, Germany did not turn. And that applies equally to Pakistan. That notwithstanding all the opportunities that existed, it consistently refused to choose the sensible path. But diplomacy, I always think, is an optimist profession. So you should continue to hope for the better.
You see, you've been the Deputy High Commissioner in Pakistan from India. You've been India's High Commissioner in Pakistan. You've also looked after the Pakistan desk while you were in the Ministry of External Affairs. I really don't see very many people. Readily, the only name which comes to my mind is perhaps Satinder Lamba. Apart from him, you've been the only one who's had this kind of a first-hand experience dealing with Pakistan. Now, talking about this thing that, Pakistan or Germany did not turn, at most of the turns it got an opportunity to turn. Now, there are 2-3 levels of people. One is, of course, the political strata of Pakistan. The second is the military bureaucracy. And the third is, the people who are neither part of political leadership nor military leadership, but yet they are influential people. And these are the three which count. Now, what do you have to say about their attitudes? Have they changed or have they remained the same?
No, I think on Pakistan, we shouldn't view it from the point of view of nostalgia. There is it's less so now, but in the past, there was a huge element of nostalgia in dealing with Pakistan. In a sense that, no, we have so much in common in civilizational and cultural terms that the differences are very small.
But they have just said that civilizationally there is no legacy which we hold together.
And I agree with that. I think in the last 75 years, the countries have drifted apart a great deal. In that sense, one can make a convincing case out that the Pakistani psyche is quite different from the Indian psyche. So I don't think nostalgia is a good building block for having a more stable India-Pakistan relationship. I consciously use the word not more normal. I think normal is a long way into the future.
Okay.
The challenge before Indian diplomacy and Pakistan diplomacy is as to how to have more stable relations. So I don't think nostalgia is a good instrument. I think we have to be absolutely realistic and see what are the new building blocks. Now, in that context, your question has Pakistan changed? Yes, I think it has changed. Is that change very visible? No, it is not. Because as we see, the current situation or other situations like this would not have arisen if the change was visible. So I would say that in many ways, Pakistan has changed a great deal and our policy needs to take into account that change. But we should be conscious of the fact that this change is not of a magnitude still that will fundamentally alter the nature of the relationship you have.
So J&K remains, Jammu and Kashmir remains the constant obsession, I have a feeling. Am I correct?
To some extent, that's so. But
if that not be the case, then what else is a dispute?
But at other times, J&K has retreated a little into the background. And it has been possible to try to build a more stable relationship on a cooperative footing.
Now,
because those attempts failed and because those processes failed, we tend to think that there's no point. There's this famous, a lot of people use it, that, it's an act of lunacy to keep repeating a policy which does not succeed, which has not succeeded. But I disagree with that view because I do think it's important that in South Asia, we don't have we're not totally obsessed with Pakistan alone. If we widen the lens, and you look at India-Nepal relations, or India-Bangladesh relations, or India-Sri Lanka relations, it's not as if you have relations on a smooth footing all the time. You have the same kind of cycles. One of our distinguished foreign secretaries, Rasgotra, he is on record, for instance, of having said that dealing with Pakistan is like being in the kindergarten as compared to dealing with Nepal. And it is true that relations in South Asia are highly contested. So we shouldn't see Pakistan as a case apart. Pakistan is a little more extreme case of bad relations.
Interesting. That's a very
But
interesting
from time to time, you have had similar situations with other countries also.
No, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that at times, over the years, one starts feeling that Pakistan's importance vis-a-vis India is receding into the background. And we start focusing on some other things, feeling a little relieved that this hyphenation may disappear over some time. And then again, it is brought back quite rudely as it has happened right now. But the only way I perhaps feel that this dispute or this problem may just go away and resolve by itself, not that the two countries would sort of do anything, is that the potential difference between the two countries becomes so much that the Kashmir on our side and the Kashmir on their side is such a stark reminder of economic developmental inequality that starts appearing to the people of the Pakistan occupied Kashmir to be a solid drawback which the Pakistan made them to suffer from.
No, that is so.
But that will take some years.
But we have not shown the kind of staying power to implement that policy. To implement a policy like that, which is, I agree
The
with.
first time I saw that, tourists had started to come. I mean, there's just so much of hospitality infrastructure which has come up in Jammu and Kashmir. People were starting to go to gurez, etc. And so, the whole of India will now refocus.
So it was inevitable in those circumstances that Pakistan would try to do something
Exactly.
to disrupt that. And I think part of policy planning means that you should be able to gain that situation and see how you will deal with that disruption. So that requires staying power.
Yes.
Because if you bring it down to a military contest, in the end, you are working against that very long-term policy, which you very eloquently pointed out as being the only successful policy that you have in your toolkit.
Yes.
So I would say that we need much more state power.
What you're basically, I mean, if I understood you correctly, are you saying that the terrorist would now have his fingers on the button that could trigger a war between India and Pakistan?
They always have had.
But wars have not started in the sense 2008, despite 2611, we didn't sort of go into war with Pakistan.
We didn't go. We didn't go because at that time the Prime Minister felt that the best way of putting pressure on Pakistan, international pressure especially, was to retain the focus on terrorism. And as long as the focus remained on terrorism, there would be a great deal of support for India and Pakistan would find itself isolated. But if we moved away from terrorism to thinking about more military kinetic measures as a way of putting
But the
pressure.
world seems to have moved away, Raghavan, in the sense that we've all become, each country has become each to his own. Okay, whatever may have gone on in the background, but Vice President Vance said that, look, your business is your business. And I'm reminded of the days of the Kargil war. Perhaps we were in the near vicinity, sort of looking at things from, we were sort of party to the whole thing which was going on there. And I found that the pressure exerted on Pakistan was very concerted.
Because we stuck to certain positions that we would not widen the conflict. Our aims would be limited to evicting the Pakistani
But things change.
leaders.
Countries' position, perception change.
But what doesn't change is the international perception that
You
we
talk
don't
about
want a nuclear.
international perception.
They don't want a nuclear flashpoint.
They don't want a nuclear flashpoint.
So if you stay away from the military aspect and remain focused on the terrorism or counter-terrorism aspect,
What does the nuclear doctrine of Pakistan say if you're privy to it?
the nuclear doctrine of Pakistan says that if we are in danger of suffering a irreversible or major military loss or a loss of territory, then we are prepared to use all instruments available with us.
Okay, so they
They don't have a non-first use doctrine.
non-first. They don't
If
have.
they feel that they are suffering major conventional losses, then they will use whatever other weapons they have in their arsenal.
Okay, tell me, in your almost how many years? Your first tenure was what, 4.5 years? As
About
Deputy High Commissioner?
yeah, four.
The second about close to 3 years.
Yeah.
So 7-8 years plus your, Pakistan desk supervision. Tell me something which are really insightful and also interesting, which perhaps you could share it with us for our viewers. A couple of them. I mean, I'm just being greedy.
I think one is something which we touched on. I think Pakistan has changed much more than we acknowledge in India.
Don't be benign, please.
No, I'm not being benign. I think it has changed both for the better and for the worse. And we are not sufficiently
Specifics.
specifically, for instance, one new trend,
Three, four things.
one new trend in Pakistan. It sounds very academic, but actually is full of political
Implications.
implications. Is urbanization and the emergence of a Pakistani middle class. We still think of Pakistan as being totally feudal. That they have landlords, they have generals, and they have a suffering public and nothing in between. That view is wrong. One index which proves that wrong is urbanization. Now, urbanization is not only benign; it's also very malign. So, if you see the forces such as the rise of the Tehreek-e-Labbaik, it's very much related to this rise of a new middle class or rise of a new lower middle class in Pakistan, which is bursting with a different kind of religiosity. But at the same time, a middle class means that views are also changing. Punjab was traditionally regarded as being the hotbed of anti-India sentiment in Pakistan. In my time in Pakistan, I found that the greatest interest in having stronger relations with India came from civil society in Punjab, from business organizations in Punjab. And in a sense, it seemed to make sense to me when one looked at Indian Punjab. Because unlike in the rest of the country, if you talk to anyone in Punjab, he will say that we need a better relationship with Pakistan. Just like in Jammu and Kashmir. Unlike the rest of the country, they don't share the same kind of perceptions about Pakistan.
They were torn asunder.
Firstly, they were torn asunder, and secondly, their future interests lie in having a better success.
Yes, of course.
The same applies to Pakistan too. And now,
But this is a term in contradiction, isn't it? How do you reconcile it?
It is a contradiction. And you're dealing with Pakistan, you're dealing with contradictions. It's not being facile. It's very serious. You can either focus on the negatives and spend your time dealing with those, or you can look at the positives and see whether there are any possibilities there. Now, it would be foolish to shut ourselves off from the negative tendencies in Pakistan and the numerous dangers which are posed to us because of that. At the same time, if we bind ourselves to a policy of only looking at the negatives, we are shutting off any possibilities for our future. The second thing I feel is, with regard to Pakistan, is that, in India, we don't seem to be sufficiently cognizant of our strengths. We have a very negative view about India itself, which is why we...
Can you elaborate on this?
I think the greatest strengths we have in dealing with Pakistan are, the strength of your economy, the plurality of your society, your enormous cultural outreach. Unless you bring those into play in a Pakistan policy, your Pakistan policy will remain very limited and very short.
But somewhere in our establishment, there is this lurking fear which has been there since Kargil days, I think, Agra days, that the more we interact with Pakistan, the more we will actually be opening ourselves to activities by the terrorists.
I think that's a legitimate fear. But this is the trade-off. If we are looking at it from outside the box, we are no longer in government.
Yes,
We have the luxury of looking at long-term trends.
yes, absolutely.
If you look at it in that sense, your only sustainable policy is a long-term policy. And your long-term policy is your economic strength, your cultural strengths, your societal strengths.
Undoubtedly.
Unless you bring them into the equation with Pakistan, you will be constantly playing this mid-level, midfield play, which leads to a crisis, then which leads to somebody providing you an off-ramp solution, then President Trump then tweeting
false flag accusation.
and in the end, hyphenation.
Hyphenation, yes.
Which is what the situation you are confronted with now. So you have to bring your other strengths into play.
Raghavan, you remember immediately after 1962, one of the secretaries in the External Affairs, Mr. Gundevia, I have read one of his books, and there he talks about a series of meetings on trying to resolve the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. From our side, it was led by Swaran Singh. From their side, it was led by Bhutto. The thing on which the whole thing broke down, I was a little surprised that we were almost ready to give away a substantial chunk of the valley also.
I mean, I studied those files, and I also read what people have written about it. Most of it is now, in fact, all of it is now in the public domain. Those series of conversations led by Swaran Singh and Bhutto, the Swaran Singh Bhutto talks, but again, it was an American idea. After the setback we faced in the 1962 China operations, that a more cooperative relationship with Pakistan should be attempted, and therefore let us try to see what they can agree on Kashmir. Those talks didn't lead anywhere because there was a absence of any common ground between the two sides. I think our approach was that essentially we have to go with the existing ceasefire line, but we can make some small territorial adjustments to make that line more rational. So it would have been a rationalization of the ceasefire line.
So Pakistan didn't turn on that corner.
No, and Pakistani view was that India has been beaten. Nehru is old. He's politically very weak. The Indians have been exposed.
It was around the same time that Saksham Valley, part of our Jammu and Kashmir, was given away by the Pakistanis.
That's they reached at the beginning of the talks. In fact, they reached the China-Pakistan border agreement was announced. In fact, as the first round of talks had begun.
I mean, what a way to clear the whole pitch before you even
Quite
start.
apart from that, the Indian delegation was then very disturbed about this because they heard about it on the radio.
Yes.
And they were wondering whether to continue with the talks, and they finally decided to continue with the talks. But the point was that the Pakistanis felt the Indians are beaten, and the only solution would be that the valley has to be returned
To further browbeat them.
So there was this absence of any common ground, which is why the talks didn't lead anywhere.
But there is a complete sense of distrust and a complete element of duplicity. You see,
So in Pakistan, there is a sense of entitlement about Kashmir. Now, to understand,
so
Pakistan,
that's something which perhaps a lot of us Indians,
we don't understand.
we don't understand that.
We should always remember that K in Pakistan stands for Kashmir. And there is a sense of entitlement. And because K is not in Pakistan, very conceivably, very evidently, K is not in Pakistan, they have a sense that somehow they are the victims of a great injustice. So just like we have a sense of being deeply aggrieved at Pakistan's very
Behavior.
demonstrably duplicitous behavior, Pakistanis are similarly aggrieved about Indian behavior. So these are two, the nature of the India-Pakistan issue to very great extent is that you have two self-contained, diametrically opposed views. You can never convince
I know.
a Pakistani of the truth of your position, and a Pakistani will never be able to convince you of the truth or the
You
merit.
must have had that, or would you avoid it, or whether the Pakistanis would avoid it? But in social situations where there was some element of familiarity and comfort in a relationship over some period of time, which anyone cultivates, did you get a chance to discuss Pakistan with people of some importance, political importance there, and to benefit from the
See, I learned-
informal atmosphere?
I learned, I had very good teachers, and S.K. Lamba was certainly one of them, but there were others also. There was also, I must say, my boss when I was Deputy High Commissioner, Shankar Menon.
Mr. Menon, yes.
And the point they always made was that we are here not to win an argument. There is no way that you can win an argument with your Pakistani interlocutor. We are here to try to reach agreements.
Because they get so emotional about it that rationality becomes a...
It's not. It's not
it-
just that. As I said, they have a self-contained view, just like we have. You cannot disprove that view, and the internal logic of their view is consistent, just like the logic of our view is consistent.
But you see, when you talk of a view which China takes of territories which it has gone and sort of occupied, whether it's Xinjiang or it's Tibet, it's in a completely different viewpoint. All I'm trying to say is that they feel it is strategically imperative, and therefore ascertainment of the will is not required.
You see, the Pakistani view about India is the same as what you just said is the Indian view of China. There's no difference.
Okay, please,
Yeah.
please, I would like...
They feel, the Pakistanis feel that you are behaving in the same way as China.
Okay.
That you don't ever ascertain the will of the people. You have a strategic objective and you go about systematically achieving that objective. This is part of the strategic distrust which exists.
And then they do whatever they have to do.
Then whatever they do to disrupt it. Now, the point is that, this debate can go on forever.
Yeah.
You will never be able to convince a Pakistani that you're right, and he'll never be able to convince you that he is right. The way forward is to think of cooperative arrangements, and that is the only thing which will impart stability to the relationship.
What's happening to Imran Khan? One is hearing all kinds of news about him.
I don't know, but it's very clear that he is a formidable challenge to the military domination of Pakistan. And the military certainly sees him as a formidable challenge. And quite unlike Pakistan military has faced challenges from political forces earlier. But nobody has gone to the lengths which Imran Khan has been prepared to go. Each time the Pakistan military faces a challenge, it has to retreat a bit. It doesn't appear like that to us. But in fact, the civilian political forces gain a little more ground. But because they have such a huge ground still to cover, it doesn't appear as if the situation has changed and really the domination of the Pakistan military is what it used to be. But I think overall, political forces are gradually inching their way towards greater importance, but it's a long process.
How do you foresee United States relationship, the way it will develop in the next 5 or 6 years with Pakistan? Is their leveraging position coming down with age?
I think in India there was a mistaken view. There still is a mistaken view that somehow we have gone to a different orbit as compared to the rest of our region.
Okay.
And
We
that-
wanted to be perceived as not as a middle power, but something.
Yeah, something more, or that we have graduated beyond Pakistan and beyond South Asia.
Beyond Pakistan, most definitely.
I think
perhaps
we should
in all honesty,
we should not overlook the fact that Pakistan is 250 million people. It's the fourth or fifth largest country in the world. It has nuclear weapons. It is deeply unstable inside. There is no way the other great powers are ever going to take their eyes off it. They will always have to deal with Pakistan, and they'll always be concerned about the great dangers of instability in Pakistan.
I feel the relationship between Pakistan and China are being further strengthened. The more weaker the Pakistan as a country becomes, the more it sort of becomes dependent.
That is inevitable because it's a Pakistan.
Rather than inevitability, we have to contend.
That also we have to contend. It's a major strategic ally, and China will not let an ally go down.
So to conclude, and more on a lighter note, since we worked together during Mr. Jaswant Singh's time in the External Affairs Ministry, do you remember any such incidents which kind of brings to your face a smile, and yet it had something quite substantial in terms of what he said or what he did?
Well, I think Jaswant Singh was someone I learnt a great deal from. And he was my boss, of course, but then he became a mentor and a kind of a friend or a family elder. But with regard to Pakistan and in fact the whole of South Asia, I think he intuitively got it right. How he got it right, I don't know, but I think his gut instincts were absolutely correct. Jaswant Singh had an intuitive feel for Pakistan. And it didn't mean that he was overwhelmed by nostalgia. He was very realistic. But he, in the end, got that central point that you have to deal with your neighbors no matter how difficult it is. And that is one ball he never let his eyes off.
I have a feeling he didn't prevail in the Agra talks.
No, in the Agra talks, I think we misunderstood Musharraf. It was not just him. I think we as a system misunderstood him. We thought we were tossing out a lifeline to Musharraf, when in fact Musharraf came, this cocky army general, thinking that he had got the Indians around and they would listen to what he was saying. So there was the same kind of perception gap. But post Agra, I think we understood that it requires much more patience and much more depth in terms of building up a case for dealing with Pakistan. And I think even though he was not foreign minister then, but at the time when Prime Minister Vajpayee went to Islamabad for the second time for the SARC summit, I think that that initiative had a great deal to do with Jaswant Singh.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, CA. It was great talking to you, and thank you for giving our infant YouTube channel a leg up.
We must do it again and talk more in Hindi next time.
Thank you. तो आज हमने काफ़ी विस्तार से TCA राघवन से बात की है कुछ ऐसे विषयों पे जो पाकिस्तान और जम्मू कश्मीर से डायरेक्टली संबंधित हैं, लेकिन वो ऐसे विषय भी नहीं हैं जिनका फ्लेवर सीज़न के साथ ख़त्म हो जाए. अगर आप इन चीज़ों को और इस कन्वर्सेशन को महीनों बाद भी देखेंगे तो जो चीज़ें हमने आज डिस्कस करी हैं वो शायद हमारे व्यूअर्स को, पाकिस्तान को और जम्मू कश्मीर के मसले को समझने में ज़रूर हेल्प करती हैं. और आखिरी चीज़, हमारी कोशिश ये भी रहेगी कि इसी तरह के इंटरेस्टिंग एपिसोड्स में इंटरेस्टिंग पर्सनालिटीज़ को लाता रहूं और आपसे रूबरू कराता रहूं. मैं एक बार फिर से आपसे अनुरोध करूंगा कि हमारे चैनल नो हाफ ट्रुथ्स, पूरा सच, इनसाइड आउट को सब्सक्राइब करें, लाइक करें और शेयर करें. बहुत मायने रखता है आपका ये करना. धन्यवाद.